The concept of heroes having an enemy with similar powers is pretty common. Flash had Reverse Flash, Spider-Man had Venom, hell, even Goku had Goku Black, which I guess it was someone else in his own exact body, but still, I mean, it counts. A villain using the power of a hero always gets our interest, partly because it provides a glimpse as to what the good guy would look like if they turn bad. In My Hero Academia, LEMILLION was stated to be UA's top student and the closest to being the #1 hero according to the wise words of Professor Aizawa. Thanks to Sanatai's prediction, we know that Mirio's hero days will eventually return, which completely ruined my chances of making a convincing theory about Mirio turning evil. What I can do though is I can ask how things would have turned out if LEMILLION was a villain from the very start. This video generally does avoid spoilers with one exception, and it relates to the past of Kurogiri. That is really the only spoiler of any significance in this video, but do proceed with caution. In this series, we've seen how villains are largely a product of their environment. This is especially obvious for characters like Gentle Criminal, but you could arguably say the same for many of our main cast. For example, Mirio nearly drowned as a young boy, but was saved by this unnamed hero who he then went on to idolize. The act of being saved by this hero is what created Mirio's drive to save 1 million people, hence the design on the front of his outfit and his hero name as well. Such an origin story could easily be contrasted with Shigaraki being saved by the villainous All For One, which then gradually led to his hatred of All Might and hero society as a whole. Therefore, with environment being such an important factor, let's imagine on that crucial day when Mirio was saved, what if the hero who saved him was just stuck in traffic or something? Now I know what you're thinking, if no hero showed up, then doesn't that mean he just dies? And in the real world, yes, you would probably be right, but in this case I refer you to My Hero Academia Vigilantes. In this spin-off manga, there was a character called Oberoshirokumo who was literally created to be a Mirio-like character for this spin-off. Shirokumo himself suffered an accident that supposedly killed him, but after being taken to the morgue, Dr. Garaki was able to remodel him until he became the highly intelligent Nomu known as Kurogiri. He was unlike any Nomu we'd seen before in that he was fully capable of independent thought and regular human conversation. Also, his original Cloud Quirk was remodeled significantly into this just amazing teleportation ability. In the same way that Shirokumo was believed to have died, what if a similar series of events had happened to a young Mirio Tagata? As a quick theory, maybe if a hero never showed up, Mirio would have nearly drowned and been taken to the hospital. Once there, he'd be in the hands of Dr. Garaki, who is apparently the only doctor in the My Hero Academia universe. Garaki would realize the potential of Mirio's permeation quirk, perhaps by looking through his file or something like that. It's not a quirk that Garaki could just steal because, as we've seen, permeation requires intense practice from the user. So instead of stealing the quirk, it's better to let the boy keep it and practice and train with it instead. Because of this, Garaki would have 3 options at this point. Number 1, he could let Mirio die and turn him into a Kurogiri style Nomu. However, the one downside of this is that because Mirio was about 5 years old, if he died and was turned into a Nomu, he'd likely stay the same bite-sized height that he was. Option number 2 though, he could keep Mirio alive but fake his death somehow. That way Mirio's family would think he died, but the doctor could secretly abduct him and give him the Winter Soldier brainwashing treatment. Like I said, with the potential of permeation, Mirio would be an invaluable asset that they could mold into a bodyguard for All For One and Shigaraki. Naturally, the third and final option is that Dr. Garaki actually does his job of being a doctor and saves Mirio, returns him back to his family, and that's the end of it. But come on guys, it's Dr. Garaki, that is not happening. For the purpose of this video, let's assume the doctor takes the second option and abducts a young Mirio as a kid. He could have done a bunch of things to fake Mirio's death, so I'm going to go with this option. LEMILLION would be given a few supporting quirks on top of permeation. Even without being a Nomu, he can still have his body modified to handle multiple quirks, so yeah, this is fine. Being the mastermind that he is, I mean, we even saw it with Kurogiri, the doctor knows which quirks go best with which, so this kind of made me wonder what type of abilities would be added to a quirk like permeation. The first power that came to my mind at least was adding the ability to fly. Being able to fly away whilst permeating through different things, you can't be captured. Like, no one's going to hold you if you can become intangible and fly away. By adding flight, this would give his punches a lot more momentum, and it also means that he'd have incredible speed in addition to being untouchable. Another quirk that I also think would be a good fit for permeation is Invisibility. It would just make Mirio the ultimate evil ghost. Unlike Hagakure though, this would be a transformation quirk rather than a mutation quirk, so if Mirio wants to, he can be visible or invisible. It's completely up to him. It makes sense for Mirio to have a power like invisibility because when he's permeating, light's going through him, everything's going through him. But I mean, as we've seen, when he permeates, we still see him butt naked there. So yeah, maybe adding invisibility would be a natural fit for a character like this. The timeline would change pretty drastically if all this happened. For starters, during the battle at Camino, Reverse LEMILLION could have easily turned the tide in favor of the villains. When Bakugo began to escape, how creepy and disheartening would it have been if at this moment we see Kacchan being dramatically yanked back out of thin air and brought back to the battlefield by just a completely invisible person? Or hell, if All For One was still captured, Mirio could genuinely break him out of Tartarus single-handedly. Now, when we look at regular Mirio's personality, he's someone who's incredibly confident. During the Overhaul arc, we saw that he pressed on ahead in front of all the heroes and tried to find Eri single-handedly, and at UA, it was him who proposed the idea of fighting the entirety of Class 1A by himself. On top of that, he's more than willing to sacrifice himself or do things that aren't in his own best interest to benefit other people. This selflessness isn't just limited to sacrificing his own quirk, but it was also shown when he turned down Deku's offer to receive One for All, because it would have caused Deku pain as well. How exactly does a selfless and confident guy like that fit into the League of Villains, and how much would his personality change as a bad guy? Assuming that Garaki doesn't mess with his head too much, this is what I think would happen. Due to his body modifications, LEMILLION Black's confidence would be through the roof, even more so than his regular self. In the main timeline, like I said, he whooped Class 1A in his normal form, so a modified evil version of this character with multiple quirks. I mean, during the USJ attack, he might have just dived in headfirst and killed the entire class. Also, because he can turn invisible, it's possible Aizawa just wouldn't know where he is, so he couldn't erase Mirio's quirks. He's only a couple years younger than Shigaraki, so I guess in this timeline, Shiggy might actually have a friend growing up besides the Nomu and fully grown adults. Self-sacrifice is also an important aspect of being a bodyguard, and we've seen that Makiya and Kurogiri, they have an intense dedication to All For One and Shigaraki. The same would also have to be true for Mirio. He'd be sure to do whatever he could to protect his superiors, even if that means dying. One thing I would say though is that if him and Shigaraki grew up together, I mean, like I said, they're quite close in age, so it wouldn't even be like a forced relationship. Like, they would genuinely be friends, and Mirio would be more than willing to put his life on the line for him. Who knows, maybe Shigaraki himself wouldn't be as vicious as he is in the present day if he had a friend like Mirio. Lastly, the final point I wanted to make was, what do you guys think LEMILLION would stand for in this scenario when he's a villain? As a hero, he wanted to save 1 million people, although it was never stated why that particular number. If we flip the script, I guess it would mean he wants to eradicate 1 million heroes, although I mean, we don't know how many heroes there are in Japan. It does have a big population, though I don't know if there'd be 1 million heroes. And I also don't think he would just do kill 1 million people. Like, that's just lame. Like, why do you want to kill 1 million people? We need to have some motivations here. So let me know down in the comments, what would the million in LEMILLION or LEVILLION stand for? I'm curious to know your thoughts because I couldn't really wrap my head around this one. Anyway, people, those are my thoughts on what if LEMILLION was a villain. If you've not seen it already, then do be sure to check out this other video I did on what if Overhaul was a hero. And until next time, peace out.